Boehm's spiral model of the software process. Boehm's spiral model. In today's session, we will be discussing Boehm's spiral model. Boehm's spiral model, we can also say it as a spiral model. So this is one of the approach for the software development. Boehm's spiral model is one of the model for the software development. It includes four phases in it. You can observe here four phases are there, that is determine objectives, alternatives and constraints, and evaluate alternatives, identify, resolve risk. So this is another sector. And next, develop, verify next level product. So this is another sector. And plan next phase. So this is another sector. So totally there are four sector, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So these are the four sectors of the Boehm's spiral model, or also we can say it has the four phases of the Boehm's spiral model. Now let us see these sectors or these phases one by one. So here each loop in the spiral is split into four sectors. Here you can observe in the diagram. So this is a starting of the loop. So this one loop is divided into four sectors. So this is one sector. So this is another sector. And concept of operation. This is the third sector. And requirements plan, life cycle plan. So this is another sector. So this loop is having four sectors. So it has been split into four sectors. So next we shall see what are all these sectors. What we do in these sectors. It is the first, each loop in the spiral is split into four sectors. So what are those sectors? Objective setting, risk assessment and reduction sector, and development and validation sector, and planning sector. So now let us see one by one. Objective setting. So in specific objectives for that phase of the project are defined. Constraints on the process and the product are identified. Project risks are identified. So what we do in the objective setting phase, so in this phase, in this sector, specific objectives for that phase of the project will be defined. So once the specific objectives has been defined, next thing is if any constraints on the process, if any constraints on the product are there, so those will be defined. And next, if any project risks are there, so those will also be identified in this sector itself. So what we do in the objective setting phase, we define a specific objectives for that phase of the project, and we define the constraints on the process and the product. And next, if any project risks are there, so those risks will be identified in the objective setting phase. So next, these all things has been done. Then we will move on to the next sector, that is risk assessment and reduction. That is risk assessment and reduction phase. Here, for each of the identified project risk, a detailed analysis is carried out. Then steps are taken to reduce the risk. It means, so as we know that the project risks are identified in the objective setting phase. So once the risks have been identified, for those risks, a detailed analysis will be done in the risk assessment and reduction phase. So whatever the risk that have been identified, for those risks, a detailed analysis will be done. So once the risk has been analyzed, the necessary steps will be taken to reduce those risks. So once these risk has been analyzed, so we will take the necessary steps in order to reduce those risk. Next we will move on to the next phase or next sector, that is development and validation phase. So the third phase is development and validation. Here, after risk evaluation, that is what a detailed, once the risk has been identified, a detailed analysis is made and steps will be taken. So this we call it as the risk evaluation. So once this risk evaluation is made, so that is after risk evaluation, a development model for the system is chosen. So what we do after risk evaluation, a necessary development model for the system is chosen. That is, a development phase begins here. After risk evaluation phase, after risk evaluation has been made, a development phase begins here. That is, here we choose a development model for the system. So then we will validate that system. So once this has been done, we will move on to the next phase, that is planning. So what we do here, the project is reviewed and a decision made whether to continue with a further loop of the spiral. Next, if it is decided to continue, plans are drawn up for the next phase of the project. That is, in the planning phase, what we do is here at the sector, the project review is made. So, here the exact software or the project what you are going to develop, that project will be reviewed at this phase, and a decision will be made whether to continue with the further loop or we shall stop here. So that will be decided at the planning phase. So if in case if a decision is made to continue, then a plans will be made for the next phase of the project. That is, plans are drawn up for the next phase of the project. So this is how a spiral model, that is a Boehm's spiral model, will work. That is, it is having four sectors: objective setting phase, risk assessment and reduction phase, development and validation phase, and planning phase. So in objective setting phase, a specific objectives will be set or will be defined, and next constraints on the process and the product will be identified. So if any project risks are there, so those will be identified at the objective setting phase. Next, so whatever the risk that has been identified in the objective setting phase, those risks will be analyzed in the risk assessment and reduction phase. So once the analysis has been done, the necessary steps are taken in order to reduce those risks in the risk assessment and reduction phase. So after this risk has been evaluated, we'll move on to the development and validation phase. So here a development model for the system will be chosen and it will be validated. Next, we'll move on to the planning phase. So here the project review will be made and a decision will be made whether to continue with the project, whether to continue with the further loop of the spiral or not. So if in case a decision is made to continue, then a necessary plans for the next phase of the project will be made at the planning phase. So this is how a Boehm's spiral model will work. Thank you.